The Scottish Football Awards racist, sexist debacle is not even remotely surprising. Last week, at the Scottish Football Writers' annual dinner, people walked out as the speaker made jokes described as sexist, racist, homophobic and misogynistic. After dinner raconteur and former lawyer Bill Copeland was the man responsible. He was also using racial epithets in pursuit of laughs. Gabriella Bennett, the co-chair of Women in Journalism Scotland, told BBC Radio Scotland, "I really enjoy it as an event, but there are always off-colour jokes made by the speakers, sexist or misogynistic. But last night's speech was really next level. I walked out after about 5 minutes of maybe a 20-minute speech." BBC and Sky presenter Eilidh Barber and others also walked out, later tweeting that she never felt so unwelcome in the industry I work in. Never felt so unwelcome in the industry I work in than sitting at the Scottish Football Writers' Awards. A huge reminder there is still so much to do in making our game an equal place. Call it out equalgum. Eilidh Barber, at Eilidh Barber, May 8, 2022. You may wonder how such a thing could happen in 2022, a time when the right-wing press would have us believe everyone is a snowflake and everyone is tiptoeing around everyone else for fear of accidentally offending everyone else. It isn't true, of course, as this event well proved, but that doesn't stop the oppressive propaganda from being ceaselessly pumped into the nation's cultural bloodstream. And sad to say, there's an audience who laps it up, usually white middle-aged and older people like Copeland, who think you can't say anything these days, even though you can, and can't bear that now isn't the same as back then, even though back then was nasty, unfair, unequal, bigoted and discriminatory against anyone not male and white. The fact is, for all the progress made in terms of the employment of women in the football industry and the exponential growth of women's football, sexism is still present on a micro and macro scale, a kind of cultural mycelium which spreads far and wide underneath the surface, unseen but omnipresent all the same. And you can tell that the people who run the Scottish Football Writers' Association still do not understand the problem, first by issuing an apology to anyone offended or upset. Yes, that old victim-blaming classic. "I'm not sorry for what I said, I'm just sorry you're offended." The subtext to which is "it's not me, it's you who's the problem." And they went on to say, "We have agreed unanimously that this will act as a catalyst to review and improve the format of our future events to make it an enjoyable and inspirational event for all." Mate, it wasn't the format that was the problem, I mean obviously. It was the content. This all smacks of blinkered defensive people looking around gormlessly at each other wondering who broke all the china and the pottery. Possibly worse yet, Bennett also said, there were loads of people laughing at these jokes. "We were 2 tables in an enormous room, and lots of people found it really funny, so there's lots of work that we still need to do in really changing people's minds about what's acceptable." I'm no longer shocked or surprised by these kinds of offensive remarks masquerading as banter, but I am sickened by normalizing this kind of thing. It's incredibly insidious. It's really damaging for women trying to be respected. It allows men to speak to women in a certain way in a professional situation. She went on to say she had spoken to the only 3 women working as staff writers in the print side of the industry, and what they told us would make your hair stand on end. Some really shocking testimonials from everything from intimidating atmospheres at football press boxes to sneering attitudes to women in sports. But it's no surprise because, again, sad to report, this is how many men are. We all know it. We all know men like this. It's why anyone who speaks up against it gets absolutely hammered. It's why that report I wrote about in January from Durham University, based on a survey of almost 2,000 male football supporters, detected what it terms openly misogynistic masculinities, irrespective of age. 68% of those polled suggested women should not participate in sport at all, or, if they did, would be better suited to more feminine pursuits such as athletics, rather than football. Media reporting of women's sports, a sphere regarded as intrinsically inferior, was seen as positive discrimination or PC nonsense. 8% were found to express progressive views in public but were covertly reactionary. This is the fertile cultural compost into which speakers like Bill Copeland cast their seeds and are clearly well received for doing so, or surely he'd not get work. His agency has now dropped him, which is rather cowardly as they would have known what he was saying to other audiences and clearly didn't have a problem with it. That he can get a gig for a Football Writers' Association is especially troubling as it suggests that many in the association have no problem with him and his material, or are prepared to go along with it, and these are the people writing about the game, and thus, in part, creating the cultural environment it exists in. Can we ever have equality, fairness and respect in football while these people are the majority and their specific male narrative is the default setting? It's everywhere. Listen to that series of BetVictor ads which run on LBC all the time, with Harry Redknapp and Michael Owen, where life centers around tips, the football teeing off and having money on the next race. Life is football and the 3Gs gambling, golf and the GGs, and all the while the wife, Sandra, is shopping, because that's what women do. You couldn't put a woman into that advert because she'd be an interloper to the accepted norms. This is matey male life and is implicitly sold as such, despite it never being said. Sorry, love. You're barred. Obviously, this sort of ad is just a distillation, a redux, a cliché, and it's just one drop into the sexist ocean, but every ocean is made up of a billion such drops. Of the 9 office bearers of the Scottish Football Writers Association, only one is female. There's your story, right there, at the core of the organization. If those office bearers were all women, do you think they'd have employed Mr. Copeland if they'd known what sort of material he'd deliver? I doubt it. And that just shows how sexism works. The whole system, the whole industry is set to male as a default. Designed by men for men. Just like the BetVictor ads. This is what Carolyn Criado Perez's book, Invisible Women. Exposing data bias in a world designed for men points out in such remarkable detail. How everything from crash test dummies to actual medicine is based on what works for the male body, not the female. But God help anyone who points this out, as she can attest, having suffered more than most from abuse, rape and death threats. Why don't people like Copeland think before they speak like this at such a function? The answer must be because he thought he was amongst friends, i.e. people who think like he does, have his values and share his worldview, and, to an extent, given the place was full of laughter, he was right. Those people clearly can't see how wrong it is to make an excellent professional broadcaster like Eilid Barber and her colleagues feel so alienated from the very profession they work in. There is a massive cultural divide here between the past and the future. This isn't a minor thing. It isn't someone just being oversensitive or someone telling jokes not to someone else's taste. It is insulting, demeaning and it affects everyday work life. It feeds the giant oppressive sexist machine which makes all our lives worse. Forever, women have just put up with such things, didn't want to rock the boat, didn't want to be the awkward one who couldn't take a joke, didn't want to risk losing their job, even. Put down, made second class and the butt of jokes, this is simply intolerable. It's time for the Scottish Football Writers Association and its members and the football industry as a whole to take a long hard look in the mirror and ask themselves, are they looking at the past or the future? Because the past was bigoted, discriminatory, racist and sexist. And we're bloody well not going back to it.